Good evening. Tonight we are going to talk about the fifth love language, physical touch. Now, four of the love languages are absolutely applicable to God. But when it comes to the physical touch, the fifth love language, then we ask questions. How can you express love for God physically today in our setting? How can you receive or experience the love of God physically today? In biblical times, there were a large number of people who were considered outcasts. The same is true today. Some were outcasts due to public knowledge of immoral lifestyles, and some were due to uncleanliness caused by sickness through no fault of the person. Leprosy was a very bad disease. It not only had a severe physical effects, but it also had more severe social effects. The law separated the unclean from the clean because only those who were ceremonially clean could worship at the synagogue. Touching someone or something unclean would make you unclean. So lepers were commanded to cry out, "Unclean, unclean." They had to live outside of the camp or the city or their village or their family. But when we come to Matthew chapter 8, at the beginning of the chapter, Jesus does something most Jews and most of us would find repulsive. He touched a leper. When he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, "I am willing, be cleansed." Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. What was the significance of this touch? Jesus didn't have to touch him. He could have healed the man at a word, but he did touch him. He reached out with his hand and touched the untouchable. What did this communicate to leper? That Jesus didn't consider him an outcast, that he was accepted in his eyes. Touch indicates acceptance of a person. You're getting down to that person's level. You're willing to communicate with someone closely. It is easy to put your money in collection plate in your church every week or mail off your donation to some charitable organization to pay some other people to help the needy for you. It is hard to get out and help the needy yourself, to personally touch them. Jesus didn't isolate himself during his ministry years. He allowed anyone and everyone to come to him, and he went out of his way to help those nobody else would. Jesus even welcomed children and communicated love to them when he took them in his arms, put his hands on them, touched them, and blessed them. Then they brought little children to him that he might touch them. But the disciples rebuked those who brought them. But when Jesus saw it, he was greatly displeased and said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of God. Assuredly, I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as little child will by no means enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. We all need some words of affirmation, some quality time, some gift, some acts of service, and some physical touch. Everyone needs to be touched. It has been proven that babies need to be touched to thrive. Babies who are held, hugged, and kissed develop a healthier emotional life than those who go long periods of time without being touched. And with no touch at all, babies often don't survive. One therapist told a convention of psychologists that people need to be touched. She said that they need 4 hugs a day for survival, 8 hugs a day to be healthy, and 12 hugs a day to thrive. Think about it. Touch communicates love without words. Your body is a touching machine. It is made to feel touch. Every inch of your body has sensitive tactile receptors that, when touched, send impulses to your brain. You were made to be touched. Your body and spirit crave it. So far, we were talking about God, about Jesus as a toucher. But let me tell you the story where Jesus was a touchy. It is recorded in Gospel of Luke, chapter 8, verses 40 through 56. Let me just give you a background. Jairus is coming to Jesus, and he goes on his knees at his feet, at Jesus' feet, and he's pleading to Jesus to go and to heal his only daughter. She's 12 years of age, and she is dying. And Jesus, we are told in the story that he went. But then we have an interruption, a terrible and untimely interruption. A destitute and sick woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. And Luke, who is writing about this, instead of finishing Jairus' story and letting us know what happens, starts another story instead. Later on, he will go to Jairus' story. So we are told that the procession to Jairus' house is interrupted by an unclean woman. The last sentence of the previous story portrayed 3 important elements. Jairus had a daughter, he do have a name, his only daughter, who was 12 years old and was dying. As the narrator transitions to the new story embodied in the original one, we start realizing that there is much in common between both accounts. And in verse 43 we read, "Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any." Did someone says 12 years? Do you mean that this woman has been sick as long as Jairus' daughter has been alive? Same period of time? But this woman has no important man to stand up for her. Jairus' daughter had her father. But this woman, no father, no husband, no mentor, no teacher, no one. This poor woman was completely destitute, a sick woman with a socially devastating disease that made her ritually unclean. What could possibly be worse than that? She had been isolated for her community for 12 years. No man could touch her socially or intimately. You could not invite her for dinner at your house. She could never enter the synagogue. But worst of all, she seemed to have exhausted all of her options of recovery. She was helpless and now materially impoverished because she had spent all she had on doctors. Understandably, Luke, as a physician, is somewhat restrained in pointing fingers at the medical profession. But Mark has no doubt remarking, "Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and has suffered many things from many physicians. She has spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse." So there is much in common for her and Jairus' daughter. Both are women, both dying, both in desperate circumstances, both 12 years in it. But the main difference, the destitute woman has no important daddy to speak to Jairus on her behalf. So she will have to do it herself. It is her last hope, and she resolves to pull out all the stops, cross as many social and ritual boundaries of appropriateness as necessary, and to do unthinkable. Jesus was on his way to Jairus' house when she resolved to make her last attempt. Perhaps she could do something for her on his way to more important endeavors, because for the last 12 years, this woman had never been welcome anywhere but was universally rejected. She had become an expert at being unnoticed. She knew how to do things without calling attention to herself. She sort of had an advanced degree in being invisible. Do some of you who are listening and watching tonight, do you know how to navigate the crowds at work, school, even at church, so that no one will ask you too many questions and you can stay isolated? Usually, it is because we fear no one will understand us, and even if they do, they will reject us anyway. This untouchable, destitute woman came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. What? She did what? How dare she? Doesn't she know that now she has made Jesus unclean? She's passing her uncleanliness to the master. Now she's going to pay for it. Jesus, you better teach her some manners. Wait. Let us stop. Let us listen. Jesus is talking. Actually, he's asking a question. Who touched me? And then we can say, see, I told you, she will be taught a public lesson now in an appropriate socio-religious behavior, or so she thinks. She has done unthinkable. The untouchable woman who is not allowed to touch or to be touched has just touched Jesus. And he wants to know who has done it. Touch becomes a pivotal word in the story as different people keep repeating it. She touched. Jesus asked, who touched me? Peter says, everyone. Then Jesus said, no, someone did touch me. And she finally declares why she touched him. Touch. Understandably, everyone denies it, including the woman, because of fear. But Jesus has so much more to offer her. She has already been cured, but Jesus wants to heal her soul also, to make her whole, to give her dignity, to publicly reinstate her into society again. And now in verse 47, now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. So much captured in just a few words. First of all, she seems to have lost her public invisibility skills. She is noticed by Jesus. You are always noticed by Jesus. Every tear, every thought, every prayer, even if the crowd does not see you, he does. I guarantee you. Understandably, she comes trembling. She's afraid. She thinks Jesus will condemn her. How many times do we view God like that? Somehow thinking that he's limited by boundaries and conditions set by humans. We feel as he is going to ask us to wash our faces and get our act together before we can come into his presence. But that is definitely not the biblical picture of God. He is a loving father, desperately waiting for his children to come home, even if they are covered with mud or even blood. He's waiting for them. So she then fell down before him. Do you remember Jairus? Just like Jairus, the important man and the destitute woman are in the same position at the feet of Jesus. Our need makes us step on level ground. In front of all the people, she declares the reason for her unthinkable social behavior, her ongoing sickness, and then how she has been healed. Jesus, couldn't you have spared her embarrassment? Couldn't you just take her aside and ask her privately so that she didn't have to suffer the glances of the people and experience shame in public? Oh, my dear child, Jesus responds, you don't really understand me, do you? I had such a surprise for you. I was about to give her so much more than she ever imagined, and everyone had to witness that. And he said to her, daughter, 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 do not even think that just because I'm on my way to heal Jairus' daughter, I don't have time left for my daughter. You are my beloved daughter. You are my little girl. This is the only story in all 4 Gospels where Jesus addresses a woman directly as his daughter. She has a new identity and a new dignity now. She is the daughter of Jesus, and he has enough time and power for her. She is no longer destitute. She is the king's daughter. She belongs. And he said to her, daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. At that moment, Jesus publicly reinstated her to society. She has a new ID tag. She's somebody. She's noticed. She's loved. She's whole. Her faith brought her to touch Jesus to receive physical cure, but she received from him so much more. She's made whole. She's made well. She's saved. And with the new identity comes a new condition. Peace. Go in peace. Daddy is here. You belong to me. Those 2 stories of Jairus, which I didn't tell you what happened with Jairus. Let me just tell you quickly. His daughter dies while he's spending the time. And then Jesus goes and he touches her and heals her. So these 2 stories have much more in common than we realize. Both the important man and the destitute woman fell at Jesus' feet. Their 2 daughters, and both of them have 12 years in common. They're both in desperate circumstances, and through Jesus' touch, they are made whole. By the laws of the land, they were both impure. One was sick, and the other was dead. Yet both of them were touched by Jesus and received so much more than simply physical health. Maybe you too are feeling destitute, as if nobody cares and nobody understands you. Perpetual emotional, spiritual, and physical disease may have depleted your energy and you're at the verge of hopelessness. The greatest news I have for you tonight is that you have been noticed by Jesus and you have been called, you're my daughter, you're my son. Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. God knew exactly how Jairus felt. After all, God himself had an only son who was dying, except that there was nobody to rescue God's son, because he died for a purpose, to restore our place in his kingdom, is his kinship. And he did. Now, once again, we are his children. And soon he will take us home with him, never to suffer, mourn, or cry again. In the meantime, may you believe in him, touch him with your hand of faith, and see how he makes you whole again and gives you much more than just a physical healing. Above all things, he will save you and give you peace And that can happen right now. Behold, what manner of love that Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. Yes, and that is what we are. That is our identity. Salvation is for all, even those who are considered destitute in their families, in their churches, in their workplaces, and in social circles. But not for God. You are His child. You are His daughter. You are His son. Go in peace. Your daddy, your Father is here.